The Whispering Woman. Everyone in the small town of Blackwood avoided the old apartment building on Willow Street. It was over 70 years old, with cracked walls, broken windows, and long, dark hallways. People said the building had a secret. They also said that if you stayed there long enough, you would hear a woman whispering your name at exactly 3 a.m. Most people thought it was just an old legend. Daniel didn't. He thought it was nonsense. When he got a new job in the town, he rented apartment 307 because it was cheap. The landlord, an elderly man with worried eyes, handed him the key and said, "If you hear someone whispering outside your door after 3 a.m., don't answer. Don't open the door." Daniel laughed. "Ghost stories don't scare me." The old man simply replied, "They should." The first few days were normal. Daniel unpacked his things, watched TV, and settled into his new home. Then, on the 7th night, he woke suddenly. His digital clock read 3 a.m. A soft voice floated
through the silence, thin and distorted, like it was coming through a broken recording. Daniel. He looked around. Nothing. But the air felt wrong, heavy, as if the room had been captured in a flash photograph and something had been left behind in the frame. He thought he had been dreaming and went back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. Daniel. This time, it was followed by another sentence. "Open the door." Daniel slowly walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, too empty, like a washed-out image with details erased. He opened the door just a little. No one was there. But for a split second, it looked like a pale silhouette had been burned into his vision, like a ghostly afterimage from a camera flash. He shrugged and went back to bed. The following morning, he noticed something strange. Wet footprints led from the hallway to his apartment door, but none led away. They looked like they had been stamped into an old photograph, appearing only when you stared too long. Night after night, the whisper returned. Always at exactly 3 a.m. Always asking him to open the door. Daniel bought a security camera and pointed it toward the hallway. The next day he watched the recording. At 2:59 a.m., the hallway was empty. At exactly 3 a.m., the video filled with violent static, like the image itself was being erased. When the picture returned, a woman in a long white dress was standing outside his apartment. Her face was hidden behind long black hair, but the camera seemed to struggle to focus on her, like she didn't fully belong in the frame. She never moved. Exactly 1 minute later, she disappeared, as if someone had cut her out of the recording. Daniel replayed the video again and again. His hands shook. In some frames, she appeared closer than she should have been, impossibly close, as if the camera had captured her stepping out of the screen. He showed it to the landlord. The old man's face turned white. "You've seen her. Who is she?" Daniel asked. The landlord sighed. "Many years ago, a young woman lived here. One stormy night, someone attacked her in the hallway. She knocked on every apartment door, begging for help. No one opened. She died alone. Now, every night at 3 a.m., she asks someone else to open the door." Daniel tried to ignore the story. But the whispers became louder. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she whispered his name over and over until sunrise, her voice warping like a corrupted audio file. Daniel stopped sleeping. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. In mirrors, he sometimes thought he saw someone standing behind him, but when he turned, there was only the empty room, like a figure had been removed from a photograph at the last second. He stopped going out with friends. One rainy night, the power suddenly went out. The apartment became completely dark. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks that sounded too close, as if they were coming from inside the walls. His phone showed exactly 3 a.m. The whisper came again. "Please, open the door." It sounded sad. Almost human. Daniel stood frozen. Then he heard another voice. A little girl crying. "Please help me." His heart raced. What if someone really needed help? He reached for the doorknob. The whisper became softer. That's right. His hand unlocked the door. Slowly, he pulled it open. The hallway was empty. No little girl. No woman. Nothing. But for a brief moment, the darkness outside looked like a ruined photograph, grainy, distorted, and wrong. Daniel smiled nervously. I knew it. Then he looked down. Fresh wet footprints crossed the doorway. They were leading into his apartment. He hadn't heard anyone enter. Very slowly, he closed the door and turned around. Standing in the middle of his living room was the woman from the security camera. Her long hair covered her face. Water dripped from her white dress onto the floor, each drop sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. She stood perfectly still, like a figure captured mid-frame in a cursed photograph. Daniel couldn't move. The woman slowly lifted her head. Her hair slid away. Her eyes were completely black, reflecting nothing, like empty camera lenses. Her mouth stretched into a smile far wider than any human smile, as if the image of her face had been torn and pulled apart. She whispered one final sentence. Thank you for letting me in. The lights went out. The neighbors heard one loud scream. Then, silence. The next morning, the landlord opened apartment 307. Daniel had disappeared. There was no blood. No signs of a fight. Only wet footprints leading toward the hallway, fading like an overexposed photograph. Weeks later, another tenant rented the apartment. The landlord warned him just as he had warned Daniel. The young man laughed. On his seventh night, at exactly 3 a.m. The mirror smile. Emily was 19 years old when she moved into her grandmother's old house after her grandmother passed away. The house was large, quiet, and over 100 years old. Dust covered the wooden floors, the clocks had stopped years ago, and almost every room contained an old mirror. Her grandmother had always warned her about one mirror. The mirror in the upstairs bedroom, she would whisper. Never stare into it after midnight. Emily always laughed. She didn't believe in ghosts. On her first night in the house, she unpacked her clothes and placed the old mirror beside her bed. It was tall, framed with dark carved wood, and its glass looked strangely clear despite its age. At exactly 12:30 a.m., Emily walked past the mirror while brushing her hair. She smiled. Her reflection smiled back. Nothing strange. She laughed at herself for remembering her grandmother's warning. The next night, she looked into the mirror again. She smiled. This time, her reflection kept smiling for one extra second after Emily's face became serious. Emily froze. Then the reflection matched her expression again. It must have been my imagination. She walked away. The next morning she tried again. Everything looked normal. Days passed. Emily almost forgot about it. Then one rainy night, the lights flickered. The entire house became silent. Only the sound of rain filled the darkness. Emily stood in front of the mirror. She slowly raised her right hand. The reflection copied her. She lowered it. Again, perfectly normal. Relieved, she turned away. From behind her, she heard a soft giggle. Emily spun around. Nobody. Only her reflection. She rushed downstairs and slept on the couch. The next morning she noticed fingerprints on the mirror. They were on the inside of the glass. She wiped them away. They returned that night. More fingerprints. More handprints. As if someone trapped inside the mirror wanted to escape. Emily called a glass repairman. He examined the mirror carefully. There is nothing behind this glass, he said. But. He looked frightened. I've never seen fingerprints appear beneath the surface. He refused to touch it again. That night Emily covered the mirror with a white sheet. At exactly midnight, the sheet slowly slipped onto the floor by itself. The mirror was uncovered. Emily backed away. Her reflection stood perfectly still. Emily took one step backward. The reflection didn't move. Her heart pounded. She waved. Nothing. The reflection simply stared. Then, it smiled. A slow, impossible smile. Emily screamed and ran downstairs. She locked herself in the kitchen. For the rest of the night she heard footsteps above her. Slow, heavy, walking around the bedroom. The next morning she found muddy footprints leading from the mirror across the room. They stopped at her bedroom door. The where footprints some video wind up comment your ghost incident.